So there's a question that I've heard my entire life. And we've all asked this question. In fact, it's been asked countless times for thousands of years around the world. Yet, I've never heard an answer to it. So I decided to go on a journey to try to find an answer to this age-old question of where did the time go? Now, I'll explain more, but let me back up to perhaps the start of this journey when I was 7 years old. See, I was a strange kid. Still a little bit strange, clearly. Thank you. You see, whereas most normal kids kind of grew up and aspired to be an astronaut or a fireman or a Batman, I wanted to be a businessman. And I was serious about this. Even though I went to a public school, yeah, I insisted on wearing a suit and tie to class starting in 2nd grade. And I couldn't just wear a backpack either. I had to carry a briefcase. Now, the teachers were a little bit concerned, as they should be. And I remember they actually sent notes. In particular read, "Dear Mrs. Garis, today was not picture day." My mom just wrote back, "Yes, he dresses himself. He thinks he's Donald Trump." And she was right, I did. And that continued actually right through to college. And by senior year, I scored a job offer from one of the largest companies in the world. And I was just psyched, steps away from realizing my dream. But being this odd kid, I continued to interview, this time just for fun. I mean, the way I saw this, hey, I'm trapped in a room with all these successful professionals, my heroes. And I just made the most out of it, asking them all sorts of questions, really turned the tables and asked them about everything, career paths, investment strategies, marriage regrets. It was totally out of bounds. And something strange happened. After I completed just over 100 of these reverse interviews, I picked up on a pattern that was troubling. See, even though I admired these people my entire life, they all talked about the common pattern of life passing by. They'd say things like, "Gosh, is it Friday already? Where did the week go? Oh, New Year's just snuck up right on us. Next thing you know, you're 40. Gosh, 10 years just fly by." What? I remember one woman actually broke down in tears when I asked her what really happened to those 10 years. She didn't have an answer. This freaked me out. I mean, picture this 22-year-old kid, and here I was looking at these people I admired my whole life. And life was just passing them by. Something was wrong here if this was the norm. So I did something drastic. Come graduation, completely outside of my norm, outside of my comfort zone for the first 22 years of my life, and against the advice of pretty much everyone, I turned down all the job offers. And instead, I decided to embark on an expedition to find an answer to this age-old question: where did the time go? So I started by using up my life savings to buy a one-way trip to Asia. And I had no idea at the time that I'd be spending the next 2 years traveling 100,000 kilometers to over 30 countries across 5 continents. Now, I won't get into how I pulled that off, in case there's law enforcement in the room. But I essentially put a message out to the world asking them to let me step into their shoes and take on their identity for a period of time. And sure enough, invitations came in by the dozen, then by the 100, by the 1,000. Before I knew it, I was meditating as a Buddhist monk in Cambodia. I was shearing sheep in New Zealand. I was crabbing in Australia, on safari in South Africa, rolling croissants in Italy, and hundreds of these fascinating life experiences that span the full spectrum of experience. Sleeping on the dirt floor of a mud hut one night, and the next I'd be in a palace with the princess of Thailand. Absolutely amazing. With each experience, I could tell I was getting closer to this answer I was looking for, until finally, it came in the most unexpected circumstance and forever changed the course of my life. It was a year in, and I was in Moscow, and I decided to get some lunch at a potato stand just opposite the Red Square. And I remember I was having the darndest time trying to order a potato. Fortunately, a nice guy behind me stepped up and offered to help translate, and we got to talking afterwards. His name was Pasha. He was a Russian scientist researching some really cool stuff. And I told him about my journey, and he said something in this deep Russian accent that I will never forget. He said, "Life is not the number of days you live, it's the number of days you remember." Whoa! Instantly, this tidal wave of images from the past year flooded through my mind, and I realized that in that one sentence, Pasha captured the key finding of my journey, that there exists this universal aspiration to live a memorable life. But unfortunately, there's a gap between the number of days we live and the number of days we actually remember. And to prove to me just how vast this gap is, Pasha asked me a question that I'd like to ask you. How many days from the past month do you remember? Really, looking back at the last 30 days, how many stand out as memorable? If it's just a handful, don't worry, you're not alone. Most people have only 3 memorable days in a month. For perspective, that's just over a month out of an entire year, or 1 year out of an entire decade. It makes you wonder what happened to all these other days. It's like there's some amnesia pandemic stealthily afflicting millions of people, robbing us days of our lives. We should be alarmed by this. But instead, we brush it off. It's normal. 10 years just fly by, we say. Well, I was alarmed. So I spent the next 12 countries researching this phenomenon alongside scholars, neuroscientists, engineers from Dublin University to Emory Medical Center. And sure enough, there is now medical evidence, scientific proof behind the problem and the solution. So why do you think it is so easy that one day could blur into the next? I used to just chalk it up to old age, right? Well, I was wrong. Turns out an aging physiology has almost nothing to do with it. Instead, the problem is because over time we develop a more ingrained routine with fewer novel experiences. Think about it. We wake up at the same time, drive the same commute, talk to the same people, work in the same office, eat the same sets of restaurants, watch the same TV, and do it all again the next day. This equates to roughly 90% the same thing that we do from one day to the next. And 50% of that is considered completely mindless, a cognitive autopilot. Now, the ramifications of this are more severe than just forgetting where you parked your car. A routine-based lifestyle is actually linked to tragic levels of global unhappiness, disengagement at work. And according to a 25-year study at the University of London, you're 40% more likely to die early. Whoa. Gives new meaning to the phrase bored to death. So how do we solve this? Change. Intentionally breaking the routine of your everyday life, whether it's ordering something new instead of the usual, parting your hair on the right side instead of the left side, taking the scenic route home instead of the normal commute, using a graphic illustrator instead of PowerPoint, wearing fun socks instead of business socks, bringing a goat to a conference. These are the experiences that stretch us, that stimulate our senses, that disengage this cognitive autopilot, really activating our hippocampus and frontal cortex, releasing dopamine, forging neurotransmitter connections and new synapse formations. In other words, these are the experiences we remember. And with each new memorable experience, there's a value gained, an added richness to life that we began to refer to as LifeProfit. This was that big idea, that light bulb moment for me that totally flipped my thinking around. So whereas financial profit relates to the monetary value gained, LifeProfit relates to the value of a memorable experience. I'll give you an example. So pick pretty much any ordinary experience and think about what you typically would do. Say watching TV. There's some value intrinsically to watching TV. But what could you do that might be different from that? Let's say fly a kite. There's that added value or added richness to life, and that is LifeProfit. Now, granted, some of these examples may seem a bit trivial. No offense, Sasha. But in reality, it's just a matter of getting in the habit of breaking routine. Because what I learned is that the key to living a memorable life is the pursuit of a memorable life. So a neat thing happened. So at the time, I'd only shared this idea informally with friends and colleagues, and yet it started to spread. I began receiving emails from people I never met before talking about the LifeProfit they gained. One person talked about how I learned to roll sushi instead of ordering it, LifeProfit. Cool, who are you? Someone else talked about I was low on LifeProfit, so I moved to an island. That's awesome. A little extreme, but awesome. Someone else, I remember, I went on my first ghost hunt instead of watching one on TV. Now I'm a LifeProfit millionaire. What does that even mean? But as more of these came in, I recognized that this was tapping into an underground social movement, an uprising against the ordinary, a revolt against routine, people doing just epic and everyday acts to save the day from being lost. And as I observe this pattern over time, I realized that the idea behind this movement isn't novel. In fact, the LifeProfit idea of breaking out of your routine or breaking out of your norm has really been the common trait of history's greatest innovators and social change agents, whether it's Rosa Parks sitting in one seat versus another, Richard Branson wearing a spacesuit instead of a dress suit. These iconic figures were simply guided by a different measure of success, a different focus than the rest of us. So, think about it. Where's our focus? We've got our bank statements, our financial advisors, we've got our credit scores, all helping us understand exactly what our financial position is and how to optimize it. Yet, do we know how much life profit we've gained? And who's helping us with that? Or even when it comes to our business, we know how many impressions we've had, clicks, likes, tweets, pins, but how much life profit have we generated for our customers, for our employees, for the community? But wait, isn't that supposed to be our brand purpose? To enrich people's everyday, real-life experience? Well, perhaps it should be more of our focus, especially when you think about over 80% of millennials now prefer experiences over stuff. What does that mean for companies that sell stuff? It means that we no longer care whether we buy the red toothpaste or the blue toothpaste, but whichever one gives us that meaningful experience. Now, some of the brands that I've worked with at P&G, Coke, Southwest Airlines have already adopted this life profit mindset in really creative ways. But perhaps my favorite example is at Zappos, where I used to think of them as a stuff company. They sold shoes. But I called them up one afternoon just with a question about running shoes. And instead of trying to sell me on the pair, the sales rep signed me up for a mud run that she found in my area. So sure enough, I went ahead and competed in my first ever mud run. It was a fantastic experience. I will never forget this moment. I could still taste the mud in my teeth. And how cool that Jennifer at Zappos helped me live a memorable life. It's priceless. Infinitely more valuable than any form of television commercial or social media post or banner ad that I possibly could have clicked on. Now, I'd like to share just one last story. Not too long ago, I was given the opportunity of meeting with a billionaire one-on-one. Now, mind you, this was a big deal for me. This guy represented my idol since I was 7 years old. And he was an old man. He actually died shortly after that meeting, so it meant a lot to me that we had that opportunity to connect. And we got to talking, we exchanged stories, and then I told him about my around-the-world journey. And he just sat there, silent, deep in thought. And he finally broke that silence when he said, "I wish we had this chat sooner. Because if I were to do it all over again, I'd focus more on growing my wealth of life profit. But it's too late for me now. So you need to help others before it's too late for them." No pressure. So I left that meeting, and sure enough, I formed the LifeProfit social organization, dedicated to helping people unlock their extraordinary potential for living a memorable life, and all the benefits that it entails: happiness, innovative thinking, community engagement. And we started off by building a technology platform that helps individuals and organizations create and track their life profit and measure the impact over time. And the early results have been inspiring. Yet we fully recognize that to reach our 5-year goal of 1 billion memorable experiences, it will require more. The participation of supporters and businesses that share our purpose. But more than that, it all begins with all of us asking, what could we do to make today memorable? Because then the next time that age-old question creeps into our mind, where did the time go? We'll have a great answer.